Today's reading from Rays of the One Light, weekly commentaries on the Bible and Bhagavad Gita by Swami Kriyananda, based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda, is on the topic, Why do devotees fall? Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda. An endlessly fascinating question is, why did Judas fall after receiving the extraordinary blessing of being accepted into the inner circle of Jesus Christ's disciples? For Judas was one of the 12 apostles, and yet he betrayed Jesus and earned for himself the opprobrium of Christendom for all futurity for his sin. We find Judas reprimanding Jesus just days before that betrayal. Jesus, aware that his disciples would soon be facing with his death the supreme tragedy of their lives, allowed Mary to express her devotion by anointing his feet with costly ointment. This act of wanton waste, as Judas saw it, awakened indignation in that disciple. Why was not this ointment sold for 300 pence and given to the poor? This, he said, not that he cared for the poor, but because he was a thief and kept the purse and bare what was put therein. Then said Jesus, Let her alone. Against the day of my burying hath she kept this. For the poor ye have always with you, but me ye have not always. Doubt not the power of delusion. Respect it, indeed, fear it, though not in the sense of cowering before it. For as Yogananda said, one is not safe until he attains Nirvikalpa Samadhi, the state of final union with God. Judas, through attachment to money, opened his consciousness to subtle influences, which may be called satanic, that drew his thoughts outward toward other related attitudes, the importance of worldly power, for instance, and of worldly influence. The Bhagavad Gita gives a graphic explanation of how easily the mind can be drawn downward once it begins to feed on wrong attitudes. In the 2nd chapter, Sri Krishna states, If one ponders on sense objects, there springs up attraction to them. From attraction grows desire. Desire, impatient for fulfillment, flames to anger. From anger there arises infatuation, the delusion that one object alone is worth clinging to the exclusion of all others. From infatuation ensues forgetfulness of the higher self. From forgetfulness of the self follows degeneration of the discriminative faculty, and when discrimination is lost, there follows the annihilation of one's spiritual life. At the first thought of delusion, Paramhansa Yogananda said, that is the time to stop it. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
Good morning, everyone. I am Nirmala, and this is my husband, Dharmadas. For those of you who don't know us, we usually live in Ananda, India. We're just visiting here for a few days, and I'm trying not to lose my voice. So bear with me. You have a drink of water. Well, Swamiji often says that, excuse me, God made us and God made the pitfalls. And so when we fall into the pitfalls, He's not surprised. He put them there for a purpose. That's what the path is. The path is riddled with pitfalls. It's not strewn with rose petals, it's strewn with thorns. And there's a reason for it. God wants us to grow strong, to be able to skim past the pitfalls, to see them, to be aware, to go around them, to keep moving forward. It's very important. It's not as though, oh, we can do this if we want to, and if we don't want to, it doesn't really matter. The spiritual path is what each soul was born for. It's the only thing that's going. It's the only thing that exists, is trying to find God. I had an interesting experience as we were flying over here. Sorry about my voice. Usually, I love to watch movies on the flight. And it's very tempting when there are sometimes hundreds of movies to choose from. And this time, Swami had just given me a book about Anandamoy Ma. And I was really enjoying it. So I thought, I'm not going to watch the movies. I'm going to read my book. And so from Delhi to Frankfurt, and from Frankfurt to Milan, I just read my book. And my consciousness was happy, centered, flowing, joyful. I couldn't believe what a difference being in the company of that saint made me. It was the best flight ever. Well, I wasn't smart enough to do it again. On the flight from Milan to Chicago, I got sucked into the movies, and I watched movie after movie after movie. It was really fun. But by the time I got to Chicago, my mind was trashed. It looked just like that airplane, just a mess. We need to choose our influences. Why do devotees fall? Here's the great line. Judas, through attachment to money, it's one of the most common pitfalls, opened his consciousness to subtle influences. How easily the mind can be drawn downward. That's what happens. The mind gets drawn downward. The Bhagavad Gita says pondering on sense objects, it goes down and down into that downward spiral. How do we get out of it? Pondering on God. The music that Swamiji has written, Master's chants, fill your mind with that, so that in every circumstance that arises, that music, those musical affirmations, that's what they really are. They're affirmations set to music. The TV industry discovered this a long time ago. If you put a little jingle, a little phrase to music, people remember it. How many people remember the Coca-Cola commercial? Lots of people. Wrigley, spearmint gum. We all can sing all those little jingles. Fill your mind with thoughts of God, and they wash away all the impurities, all the negativity. Watch your influences, just like me on the airplane. Choose the saint. Don't choose Slumdog Millionaire. Don't go there. Fill your mind with important things, things that will help you. It's like a diet for your mind. You choose very carefully. You want to choose good food. You don't want broken glass in your diet. Choose influences that are good. Stay away from negative people, people who gossip, people who are worldly. Shun them like the plague. Stick with those influences, and that's why Ananda exists, to help people have others in their lives who will help them in their search for God, not draw them down, not think about how bad this person is or what they did in the past and tie them to that, but always hold up the highest for each person so that everyone can grow spiritually. That's what we're here for, to help each other to do that. The other important aspect of this search and not falling into the pitfalls is to remember to serve. Service is joy. Service is self-forgetfulness. And when we're going through any kind of difficulty, any sort of pain, any sort of physical trauma, any emotional stuff, whatever it is, the answer, as Lahiri Mahashaya said, is Kriya Yoga. And as Swami says, the answer is service. Serve. Forget about yourself. Especially as our Ananda demographic seems to be aging slightly. I've noticed that there's another way that we fall on the spiritual path. We fall asleep. And it's easy to think, I have been striving for 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 years on this path. I'm tired. My arm hurts and my ear hurts and my nose hurts and everything hurts. I'm just going to sit down here on the edge of the path and I'm just going to sort of burrow into my little nest and just take a little nap for a while. Don't do it. It's a trap. It's the biggest pitfall of all. Because this incarnation, having guru bhais to support you, having ways to serve God that are immediate and deep, this is an incredible incarnation. Don't waste even a minute of it. And when you take the inventory of all the ways that you're tired, you don't feel well anymore, think about Swamiji. Is there anything he doesn't have? Diabetes and heart disease and hip surgeries and there's so many things. The list is like this, and you ask him, how's your health? Great. He will never give in to anything in the body like that. Always keep going. At the age of 78, he started to work in India. I can't even imagine the kind of energy that must have taken, and willpower, and especially dedication to Master. That's what we need to emulate. It's a big world out there. Don't burrow into that little nest at the side of the path and take a nap. Serve. Do something. Do something beautiful for God, as Mother Teresa would say. We're doing a lot of work in India now, and we need help. So if you can come for a month or a year, come, serve. There's plenty to do. In India, we often say it's 1968. It's just bare dirt. There's nothing there. And it's a pioneering work that needs not only your prayers, which are very valuable and have sustained us this far, but we need energy too. So come and join us. God bless you.
From Whispers from Eternity, I'm going to read a little section of, this is not one of the whispers themselves, but this is the last several paragraphs of a little piece called Watching the Cosmic Motion Picture of Life. Master says, man's consciousness may be described as being embedded in God. As such, all pain is illusory. It is a dream, a movie. All our suffering is due to our imaginary identification with these bodies of ours, and with wrong habits of living and thinking. As long as we inhabit our bodies, we have no choice but to travel through life's labyrinthine paths and participate in its multitudinous experiences. Why not, then, view it all with the consciousness of the angels? As they live far removed from this earth, so also can we if our hearts are inwardly free. Life and death will appear to us then as an unalterably joyous experience. We shall find ourselves united with cosmic consciousness and shall no more be affected by any wakings of birth or sleepings of death. Thus will it become natural for us to watch the cosmic motion picture with pure delight, knowing that even those who stumble, dazed, along the jungle paths of delusion will come out in the end and will know eternal freedom in ever-existing, ever-conscious, ever-new bliss. This topic of why do devotees fall is a very deep one, much deeper than can be easily addressed in a short talk. In fact, in the reading, Swamiji doesn't spend a lot of time addressing why devotees fall. It's a very difficult question. How devotees fall, on the other hand, he goes into quite a bit, and next week goes into further how devotees rise. But the question of why, how do we understand the problem is the first part I wanted to speak of. Because, as Nirmala said, we are all prone to this. How many ways we can fall, how many challenges we face in life. Of course we're going to stumble. The important thing is, what do we do about it? How do we approach it? How do we respond? And as Master said, God doesn't mind our faults. He minds our indifference. So he knows we're going to struggle. But for us, the natural human tendency is to feel guilty. Oh my God, I fell again. And we fall because we get fascinated. We fall because this Maya is so incredibly compelling. We fall through ignorance. We fall through stupidity. I had an experience many years ago. It's a lot easier to talk about the ways that you fall physically than it is the ways you fall spiritually. But on a frosty November morning, I made the mistake of stepping onto the north side of the roof that I was building. And guess what? It was frosty and it was icy. And I went shooting down that roof very fast and off the side of it and down to the ground. And another time, earlier in my youth, I jumped out of an airplane at 3,000 feet with a parachute. Now the issue isn't so much the falling, it's the landing, as we can all sort of intuit. The falling can actually be kind of fun. You know, you go down a ski slope, you're essentially falling. In some cases, you are falling. But it's great fun. People pay lots of money to go up to the top of a ski slope and go down to the bottom. But when you get to the bottom and you have to climb back up, you know, in life on the spiritual path, they don't give you a chairlift to get back up to the top of the mountain. So if you spend your time sliding down, you have to put painstaking steps back up that mountain. The important thing to realize in life is not to fear. Swamiji says, fear the power of Maya, but not in the sense of cowering before it. He says, have a healthy respect for it. But recognize that it's going to happen because we have past karma, etc. In the movie Bambi, which is one of Swamiji's very favorite movies of all time, there's a classic moment. We perhaps all remember it. It's not when his mother gets killed, for God's sakes. I'm not going to go into that. But it's when Bambi gets shot in the leg and he's jumping across this chasm and his legs go out from under him. He gets to the other side and he's down on the ground and the fire is burning. And perhaps everybody remembers what happens, but for those of you who don't, who comes along but his dad, the prince of the forest, this big, huge deer, and what does he say? He says it really intensely. I mean, for kids, this must be really something. He says, "Get up!" And he's not being sweet and nice about it, you poor little thing. He says, "Get up!" Because this fire is coming, and this is what happens to us. If we, as Nirmala was saying, if we burrow in and snooze by the side of the path, we're going to waste an incarnation. So it's very, very important that we develop the habit of getting up. You trip, you fall down, you get up. You stand up, you get up, and you move on. This is how we have to approach our lives. We have to approach the spiritual path and recognize that a certain sense of humor is required. We're going to get good at this process. It's the nature of the way these things work. But it's important to realize that there's a step that we can go that's beyond all this. And this is to prevent the problem from coming up in the first place. Now, how do we do that? We do that by having an inner experience that is so deep and so compelling and so impossible to compete with that this Maya can no longer enchant us and draw us out of ourselves. When you have that experience of deep bliss inside of yourself, this world then becomes an opportunity, as Nirmala was saying, to serve, an opportunity to bless others, an opportunity to enjoy without becoming entrapped or ensnared. And as Lahiri Mahashaya said, the answer to it all is Kriya Yoga. If you don't have Kriya Yoga initiation, get it. If you do have it, practice it deeply with your heart's devotion. No one can do that work for you. No one can love God for you. God's grace can come. In fact, God's grace is all around. But we ourselves have to learn to receive it. We have to make ourselves open to receive it. And when we do, we find that it's there all along. It was there all the time. Master tells the story of Saint Anthony, who was one of the early Christian saints after Christ, who went out into the desert, and he was a monk in the desert for many, many years, many decades. And he went through all kinds of struggle and challenge, overcoming his limitations and delusion. And finally, Satan was coming to him and threatened to crash the cave that he was staying in, threatened to crush him under this cave. And eventually, St. Anthony never gave up. He never gave in. Eventually, Christ came to him. And Anthony said to him, "Where were you all this time? Where were you? I've been praying to you for years, for decades. Where were you?" And I always remember Master's voice when he said this, "Anthony, I was always there. I was always there." We ourselves have to recognize with Anthony that God is always there. He's always with us. but we can more easily perceive him when we learn to turn our attention inward and spend at least some significant time every day diving into that inward consciousness. Because when we do, we know his bliss, we know his joy, and that joy is so consuming that nothing else can take us away from it. We want that alone, and that's God, and God is with us all the time. There's no other need, there's no other requirement. Then we become fit to serve. Then we become purified and a fit channel for God to flow through us. But meanwhile, so we fall. It's going to happen. It does happen. But if we get up and if we tune in, then we find that God is reaching down to us with both hands as we reach up with one. And this can be everyone's experience. So know that he is with you all the time. And know that if you would find him, you just have to learn to look inside. And Kriya Yoga is perhaps the deepest and most beautiful way, but any prayer, any meditation, nothing is wasted in this regard. I always remember Swamiji using the example of the gold rush, and here we are in the gold country. He said, you think of all the thousands of people who crossed the country in the 1800s to come to this area in search of gold. How many of them actually found it? Very few, relatively. Some struck it rich, some made a living, and most struggled. In the spiritual life, no effort is wasted. Anytime you offer your heart to God, you create the magnetism, you create the desire that will eventually have to be fulfilled. And when God comes to you, there will be no more falling into pitfalls of despair or delusion. Namaste.